Hey there everyone, I'm Meteorologist Addison Green and wanted to dive into the tropics with you here at KHOU as we talk about Grace and Henri, two systems that both are threatening land masses within the next 24 to 36 hours, especially for Grace, making its way down in towards Mexico. Henri will be a little bit later on as we make our way in towards the end of the weekend. But either way, both systems are certainly being heavily monitored out there across the Atlantic basin. And we have still yet to cross off more names off that list, thankfully. We don't see anything majorly threatening across the board as we look across the Atlantic basin. We just have one small tropical wave we're keeping our eyes on, but that is it. There is definitely a lot of Saharan dust keeping a lot of those tropical waves from trying to start as they come off the African continent. As we look out towards Grace's point of view, it is relatively 600 miles away from the Houston metro area, but nonetheless, it will still be impacting our weather, at least out by the coastal areas where we're going to be dealing with the potential of seeing some rough surf as well as some dangerous rip currents out there for the rest of this Friday in through Saturday morning. That may even be extended towards Saturday afternoon. But regardless, if you're going to be heading out towards the beaches to try and get some cool relief, get away from the heat that's going to be building on up over this weekend, bear in mind you want to swim where you see a lifeguard to be around. Don't go swimming in those waters on your own, especially if you see those waves looking very choppy. And the reason why we see all this rough wave activity coming our way is because Grace is kicking up all that ocean activity and churning the waves, bringing it over towards our vicinity. You can see the forecast wave heights right there in that green highlighted area, a little bit of teal. That's those wave ranges, relatively about 4 to 6 feet or so, which doesn't seem like much, but that can be continuous, coming in wave after wave. And if you're having a small boat just offshore or if you're swimming nearby, it could definitely bring around some rough conditions out there that may catch you off guard. But as we watch over time, as Grace eventually makes a second landfall in Mexico within the next 24 hours or so, we'll eventually see that wave activity starting to weaken as you make your way into Sunday. So Sunday will definitely be the better of the 2 weekend days coming on up to enjoy the Gulf of Mexico. But as we look right here for Grace, it's packing winds of 90 miles per hour, so that makes it a Category 1 hurricane. And there are tropical storm warnings and hurricane warnings along the coastal areas of Mexico from Tampico down in towards Veracruz. Eventually, it will make its secondary landfall into Mexico, possibly as a Category 2 hurricane with winds in excess of 105 miles per hour. But once it moves further inland, it will weaken from a Cat 2 potentially to a tropical storm and rain itself out, unfortunately, over central portions of Mexico. So there may be some unfortunate flooding situations over that way, even some possible mudslides going on because all the rain will be wrung out from the mountainous areas that we're going to be watching Grace run into. But there is a chance, and we don't see this too often, of seeing possibly that center circulation of Grace moving on over in towards the eastern Pacific and then re-strengthening into a system once again, because it's going to weaken as it goes over the mountainous areas of Mexico. Now, storms can cross over from the Atlantic basin to the Pacific basin. It's rare, but 19 storms have crossed over since 1842, since how long records have been kept. But storms must not degenerate, meaning they can't lose that core circulation in order to keep that same name. If they do lose that core circulation, get just a little bit of a swirl in the atmosphere, and then it re-intensifies out in the eastern Pacific, it would get a new name from the eastern Pacific list. But it is possible it may keep that name, but usually that happens when storms cross over the central portions of Central America as opposed to the rough terrain of central Mexico. But you can see right there, Grace running pretty much like into a roadblock. Boom, there we go, seeing that system weaken, all that rain being wrung out of the system right there across the coastal areas of Mexico. And then if it survives that crossover right there, it could possibly strengthen back up into another system. But like I said, it's rare. It's only happened 19 times in well over 100 years. As we move on out from Hurricane Grace in towards where we see Tropical Storm Henri, we can see that that system is starting to look a little healthier as we've moved on throughout this Friday. We're looking at right here the visible satellite imagery, and as we get those brighter colors of white, brighter shades of white I should say, we're starting to see those colder cloud tops indicating that the system is healthier, it's breathing easier, but it's still a little tilted because we still have some upper level winds influencing its structure. So it's not being able to become vertically stacked, and that's where hurricanes and tropical systems in general like to be vertically stacked so they can freely breathe and fully grow. But as they get tilted, like a little bit of some wind shear knocking it off on its side, it's going to be able to kind of stifle its development right there, which is definitely some good news. We don't want a monster major hurricane off the East Coast. We certainly do not want that at all. But you can see right here, we have some nice feathering going on, those outer bands of clouds. That is indicative of a system being on the healthier side of things, becoming more vertically stacked, and we're not seeing too much of these outer cloud bands becoming blown off to one side, indicating we would have a lot of wind shear associated with that system. Water vapor in the wind imagery shows you that we are seeing that tight ball-like circulation going on, so it's looking less shrimp-like, looking more like a typical tropical system. And as we move on in across those winds, you can see that wind field is starting to get a little broader and starting to influence portions of the East Coast from the Carolinas down and towards Georgia with some rough wave and wind activity. But the latest information coming on in from the National Hurricane Center has Henri with winds of 70 miles per hour, so it's a very strong tropical storm. As it moved up one interval of 75 miles per hour, that would make it a Category 1 hurricane. We already do see, just south and east of New York City and pushing in towards Cape Cod, we do have tropical storm watches and hurricane watches because of now where the forecast track wants to put Henri as we move on in towards the tail end of the weekend. By Sunday morning, we're going to be seeing potentially a Category 1 hurricane about 200 miles southeast of the Hamptons, for instance, up there in Long Island. So there'll be a lot of rough wave and wind activity over this vicinity. If it just skirts the eastern fork of Long Island, does not make a landfall, and potentially makes a landfall as a hurricane in southeast portions of New England, that'll be the first time since Hurricane Bob back in 1991 making a hurricane landfall over in this vicinity. As it comes in towards this region, it'll eventually slow down and weaken over time, which takes it from Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening of a landfall to eventually by Tuesday morning still over the same area. So that means hours upon hours of tropical rains coming down. The coastal area is being bombarded with rough wave and wind activity, so that is not a good situation at all for a lot of major metro areas that aren't typically accustomed to dealing with tropical activity. As we look over the spaghetti plots, the various computer models right here coming on in for Tropical Storm Henri, we can see how they have changed over the course of the past 3 runs. So yesterday, we can see how it was pretty much broad, but still covering anywhere between portions of, say, southern New Jersey to way out towards the open waters of the Atlantic, meaning there was a lot of options for this storm to potentially go through. As we move forward in towards Monday, and then, I should say this morning, and then later on towards the afternoon hours, we start to see that little bit of bunch of spaghetti models right there starting to shift a little bit further west. If you were watching me yesterday at the same time, we had these shifting further east. So we will see some more shifts over time. But what we're starting to see come into the picture is more of those models becoming closer together. Less discrepancies, less disagreements going on with them. They're more coming in line of where this system may go. And now we have shrunken down that potential where the system may go to anywhere between, say, central portions of New Jersey to possibly just narrowly missing the Cape Cod area, the eastern edge of New England. So it's looking more and more likely we will be seeing a tropical impact, either direct or indirect, happen across portions of the Northeast. As we move forward with your wind and forecast for waves as well, we can see the rough wave activity. We have swells right there of relatively about 20 feet or so, and we can see that circulation going on and counterclockwise around what we have going on for Henri. As we move forward in time, we can see that wave activity starting to push northward, heading in towards tomorrow afternoon. So by Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, portions of the Northeast are starting to feel those impacts. Gentle at first, and then gradually increasing over time. As we zoom on in across sections of New England, you can see coming in out of that counterclockwise direction, so coming in out of the southeast, moving in from the east, and then coming into the northeast, we're going to get those waves to push on in across the Long Island Sound and impact portions of the Jersey Shore. The further away we put Henri, the less of an impact we'll see come on in across New England. But you can see right there, Cape Cod, the little elbow right there, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket stick out, way out into the portions of the northern Atlantic Ocean. So they will definitely feel the impacts regardless of where we see Henri go. As we put this forward in time, we can see that heavy wave activity goes right into the ocean state of Rhode Island, and the wind activity gets pushed northward into sections of Maine and down across in Vermont and eastern sections of Massachusetts, right into the Massachusetts Bay Area, and of course where Boston is sitting just offshore. So much of this region potentially could be dealing with those tropical impacts as we go forward from Saturday evening through Sunday and eventually into Monday as well. So like I mentioned, the rain potential will be becoming more of an issue over time because something that big, having all that moisture packed with it, doesn't just have that moisture just fade away as it makes its landfall. It has to get wrung out, and we can certainly see that there is the potential for maybe 1 to 3 inches, or some spots 3 to 5 inches of rain as you go from the New York State Thruway right there, from Albany down towards New York City, pushing eastward in towards eastern sections of New England right there, with the bullseye being right here. That is just southeast of Boston, maybe about 50 miles or so, and that's indicating 5+ inches of rain that may come down. And that's just a rough estimate. We could easily see rainfall totals being much more than that. That's why there is that chance for seeing flooding going on as we move on in past Saturday into Sunday, stretching on in from Philadelphia all the way up into sections of southern Maine, going over there towards the Portland area. So this area right here is rather hilly, and we do see some jagged coasts in some spots, but there's a lot of smooth coast, meaning you can easily push that water inland, a little storm surge. But heavy rain could be leading to some flooding situations over major populated areas from Boston down in towards Providence, pushing to the Hartford area, and of course sections of New York City area up towards the east into the Long Island area. So the reason why we are seeing both of these systems going in the directions that they are going, projected, is because of two high-level pressure systems up aloft, upper high pressure systems right here, I should add, that we have right here, the Bermuda High, and this one is a big high pressure sitting over the southeast. As we move forward in time, we're looking at 500 millibars, 18,000 feet, so relatively about half the height. You would see a commercial jetliner, I should say, flying in the skies. You'll be watching these systems build on in and stretch over time. Now, the Bermuda High will get the chance for bringing Henri further northward and try and pulls it out to sea, but it's a question if we're going to be seeing a little bit of an influence from an upper level low and its trough right here trying to pick it up and pull it towards the west. So it's a little bit of a tug-of-war action going on right there. Yesterday, we had the Bermuda High winning. Today, we have that upper level trough trying to pull it in a little bit towards the coastal areas. That's why that cone pretty much goes due north. In the Houston metro area, Grace will not be a concern too much longer as it's going to get shoved down towards the southern end of the Bay of Campeche and pushed in towards Mexico. But as we move forward in time, you can see that Bermuda High eventually wins, starts to pull Henri away, but not before it brings around all of those tropical conditions coming on in for the northeast. And this high pressure system doesn't move too much. In fact, it sits and parks itself over the southern plains, which means the heat dome would be becoming something you'll be hearing about over the next several days as temperatures begin to rise, and very little cool down will be coming on in for numerous spots. Now, as we make our way in throughout the month of August in towards September, we're going to be seeing more tropical waves coming on in, which means we're going to be seeing potential more tropical systems. And that means we have the chance for more areas to potentially be impacted by these systems moving on in across the Atlantic basin, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Caribbean to the Gulf of Mexico. So we go in towards the peak season mid-September, then things quiet down very slowly as we make our way in towards the end of September. We have a little bit of a peak right here in mid-October. A little bit more of some systems can pop on up closer to the United States, closer to the Caribbean, and things gradually cool down nicely as we end on in towards the end of November, going towards Thanksgiving. We see those systems kind of fade away. We don't have the conditions anymore for them to really be popping on up, which is some good news right there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us here at KHOU and the weather team for your answers to come your way on social media. You can find me right there, Addison Green WX, on Twitter and on Instagram, as well as my Facebook page. And we'll have more updates as time goes on and as we go through the weekend ahead.